Okay, so now we're going to take a look at integrating CA Agile Requirements Designer, which is a requirements design and test case optimization and test case design tool with VIP Visual Integration Processor. So first things first, I just downloaded the trial copy of Agile Designer. If you just go over onto the CA website. Now what's different with Agile Requirements Designer? We did a video on coverage techniques, which does all sorts of different coverage techniques. The advantage of something like ARD is that you build a model. It's based on kind of model-based testing or requirements-based design. And what you'll see in here is we've built a model, and you can look through all sorts of different combinations of paths of activity. And the key point is that you can get the expected results. With normal coverage techniques, you've got to kind of work them out based on the coverage. Now with this one, what you're actually thinking about here is that we've got actually 8 test cases, like so. Now those test cases have most probably been optimized based on something like an all-in out edges, which is each decision gate, all edges, probabilistic, all pairs, etc. There's all sorts of different coverage techniques, but we've ended up with 8 of them. And if you look at the 8, you'll see that down the left-hand side we've got the test data and the expected results. Now let's just talk a little bit about test data. So if you go into a decision gate like so, and look at test data, you'll see variables, and these are the variables that we're going to be dealing with. And if you click in here, you'll see, I've just got to set my context, 1 second. We come into the Agile Designer Data Painter tool, and it's an extremely powerful test data engine. You can do all sorts of things in here. You can do SQL lookups, you can do next randomization, and it's a very powerful tool when it comes to preparing the test data for automation frameworks, which is what the focus of today is all about. So I won't go into that because you can look at that yourself. Now, if you come in here and just click on the little test data button, you'll see we've got a set of test cases, and with those test cases we've got here, that's actually something that needs to be resolved. And if we click resolve, you'll see that we're going to go to our test data engine and actually put some values in, like so, this concept of resolved and unresolved, like so. Now, the other thing that you need to think about, and this comes to when you're generating, using Agile Designer to generate, now you can either generate scripts or you can generate packs of test data. In this case, I'm using test data. Either way, what you want to do is to use the parameter feature inside ARD, because you'll most likely want a set of scripts or data that is linked to a particular scenario. And here I've got different types of categories of claim, and that's going to be passed in, and we're going to use VIP to pass that in through the top of the flow. The other thing to understand is that associated with each model, you can then link it to automation. And what I've done here is I've pretty much just created a very basic automation script which is going to create me a set of CSVs, and that CSVs is going to be picked up by one of my automation tools. It could be something like Ranorex or Test Plant or Selenium scripts and the like. And then what you do is you link the automation snippets to the data as it's flowing through. If we go back to our test cases and just click on the little automation export automation tab, you will see here that we've actually got all of the test case names, and all I've done here is pulled out the step name and then the actual data that's associated with it, along with the expected results as well. Now that would normally push the data out, and you could just click on export, which is obviously a manual process, and that's then going to go off and create some scripts. So let's have a look at those. And here's some scripts, and you can see that we've actually in this case just pushed out some CSVs, and that's what's going to be driven into our automation framework. Now the secret is to just click on the Save Settings button here. So if you click on Save Settings, what that will do, let's just push that to the right place, and that's created those little scripts. And then once again we can then go off all the components that we need for the scripts. And in here you'll see that there are a couple of little scripts. One is generate scripts.bat if you want to run it from the command line, and then there's the params.csv. This one you're not going to change, this one we're going to replace with VIP, and this is the one we're actually going to generate. So we'll just have a quick look at it. And you can see I've got the claim motor, which is actually the default. Now what we're going to do is we're going to be actually creating, running the script many times and populating this here with a set of different categories of claims. So let's just go into VIP and have a little look. Now this is just invoke ARD. Now this would most likely be done as part of a much larger framework. So this would be, part of your DevOps framework where you're building a model. You're actually then invoking ARD to build either the data or the scripts themselves. Then the data would be run into the appropriate environment, and then the results would be tracked by something like a Team Foundation server back into your DevOps dependency map. Now let's just have a quick look in here. It's pretty straightforward. So the first thing is I'm just going to create some arguments, and here what I've done is I'm just going to put in a string motor or home. You could actually look these up from a database. You might be interested in different types of currencies or different types of trades or markets or something like that, in which case you would just populate this list using standard VIP functionality. Now the secret here is that I'm going to invoke a process activity. So if you look in flowchart, you'll see invoke process down here, and all I've done is drag that on, and you'll see here that we're literally just calling the executable, which is all you have to do for batch or command line integration with ARD. And then we've created a variable called arguments, and that variable arguments is then made up of var arguments here, which is at the top of the flow, is made up of two things. One is the input, which is the config.xml, the params.csv, and then the parse.xml, which is a list of the paths that we're going to be processing. Now the bit we're going to be working on is this params.csv here. Everything else is standard. So here we've got a thing called split string. So we've taken our argument part type of claim like so. We split the string up, pop it into an array, and now we're then going to push that out into write text to file. So in other words, we're going to split it up and create a different params.csv every time. We then go and invoke a process activity, the first one here, which is to call the Agile Designer with the var arguments, which is pretty static. And then at the end of it, we're actually just using a little 7-zip utility to zip them up, so we could then move them up maybe onto one of our build machines and run the automation from there. So let's just give it a go and run execute. And you can see what it's doing now. It's pulling out the first bit of the string, it's calling Agile Requirements Designer, it's creating the scripts, it's zipping them up, and then normally you would have some kind of like an FTP process or a copy process to push them in. So hopefully you can see it's pretty easy to combine the power of VIP and ARD to drive a state-of-the-art DevOps framework.